Hey, welcome to Your Best Podcast with me, your best life coach, Teemaree, and a phenomenal guest. This episode is going to be all about wealth and estate planning, and I have someone phenomenal that you are going to be so happy to be hearing from today. Elijah Keys is an estate planning attorney near San Jose, California. Woo woo! I'm a Cali native. He helps keep family relationships strong by navigating probate issues. So welcome, Elijah. Thank you so much for being with us today. And to kick things off immediately, where can everyone get in contact with you and reach you best?
Sure. So it's important to know that attorneys specialize. I'm originally from Wisconsin, but I work only in California. And so if there's a California issue that people have, then they can go ahead and reach me at Keys Law Group at our website. It's KEYESLAWGROUP.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Excellent. I'm so happy to have you here today. Right now, we're going to kick things off with a game because here at Your Best Podcast, it's all about living our best and being supported in our best and having fun, honey. Because if it ain't fun, right? So we're going to play a game, and this is the premise. It can be confusing to understand what an estate is. So this game is called Do You Have an Estate? And it will be a quick kind of fill in the blank. Basically, does this qualify? Okay. So do you have an estate if you have a car?
Yep.
Ooh. Do you have an estate if you have a house?
Yes.
Do you have an estate if you have a vacation rental?
Yep.
Do you have an estate if you have intellectual property?
Yes, and those are hard.
Okay, we'll get into that more. Do you have an estate if you have collectibles of some kind?
Maybe.
Ooh, okay. Another one to dive into. Okay. Depends on the value, you said, yes?
Well, so the issue of an estate means what you own and your decisions. Okay. Mm-hmm. So most people think of estate planning as like, hey, there's a big house on a hill in upper New York and someone's worth $25 million and anybody worth less than that doesn't need a plan. And that's not what an estate is. An estate is what you own and the things that you need to make decisions about. And that's really what it is. It's not anything more complicated than that. So anybody that has things to give away or that people might like or want, then that's really what an estate is. And so when you say collectibles, the reason why I say maybe is because if nobody wants them, then nobody wants to take the effort to actually go through an estate. So let me give you two examples. I have had clients who have Hummels. Hummels are little collectible dolls from Germany. They are highly valuable. Some of them are. And I had clients fighting over them for a long time. There are also family collectibles like family history stuff. Those are oftentimes very wanted. But then you have baseball cards. Maybe they have value, maybe they don't. If nobody wants them, then basically they're just going to get trashed.
I love how you're breaking it down. See how we're already learning. Woohoo! Yes. Okay. And that's the point of the game. And I love that you got this off the top because that is absolutely a wide held belief. Even myself, as I've started to navigate just making smarter financial decisions, etc. The thought, even in the name, estate planning, it does feel like, okay, I have to have an estate, a large piece of property, a large mansion somewhere. And that's when I can finally pursue this. So thank you so much for kicking this off, playing along, and summing it up for us all just right off the top. So to begin, how long have you been an estate planning attorney?
15 years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think that you're in Michigan, right?
Yes.
Originally California native, so you escaped the insanity. Welcome. I went to it, so I guess we kind of crossed paths in between. And so each state has different probate rules. There is no national probate law. It's all state driven. So Michigan has different rules from Nebraska, has different rules from Arizona, has different rules from California, has different rules from New Mexico. They all have different rules. So I operate in California, so I only work in California. If you meet an attorney, they say, I can help you anywhere in the country. They are liars and thieves. Please don't trust them.
Thank you. That's huge news, because actually that can lead into another question that I have for you, because so I have come across where sometimes with different churches, large organizations of that nature, they're helping their church body to engage in estate planning.
Sure.
So as long as your assets and your attorney that is helping you, or the firm that is helping you, is in the same state, that's generally okay. But you're saying if the lines are blurred anywhere else, then that's not okay. Is that kind of summing it up clearly?
It's really not about the assets. It's about where the person lives or where they want to live. So let's give an example for you, Teemaree. Let's say that you live in Michigan now, but you eventually want to retire, and you want to retire in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's where you want to go. The question is, how long are you going to stay in Michigan? Because Michigan laws are very different from the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so if you want to stay in Michigan for a long time, but you have property in, maybe you have property in Maine, and you have a vacation rental in Florida, and you have some property that you inherited from your family in California, you can still use a Michigan attorney, because it's really about you. It's not really about your stuff. Your stuff is just stuff. It's really about you. And so the attorney that you should use would be a Michigan attorney. Now, I have plenty of clients who come to me and say, Elijah, I don't like California. I'm leaving, and I'm going to one of these 3 states. Well, my question is, how long is it until you go? And are you sure that you're going to stay there? And most of the time they say, I'm not sure when I'm leaving, and I don't know if I'm going to stay. So my answer is, you might come back. Yes, we might come back. So we'll go ahead and prepare a plan for them. And then if they're in the state and they decided to stay and they've been there for more than a couple of years, then they should go and see an attorney in that state to see if everything works correctly. So in our example, if you're going to the U.S. Virgin Islands, then you would decide after 3 or 4 years of living there, you've become a permanent resident, you're not leaving, you're staying there, then you would go see an attorney to make sure that your Michigan plan worked well for their rules.
I see. Now,
but even if you have property in those different states, it's okay, because the main purpose of the plan is to protect you, and your stuff is part of that, but it's not all of it.
Okay. So, oh my gosh, just so many questions are being branched out from this. Okay. So as I understand it, the estate planning is going to protect the person's collected assets from being lost in probate court if they die, or being taken over by a family member that all of a sudden maybe comes out of the woodwork and says, hey, I want to stake claim to something. Is that a correct understanding?
That's half of it.
Okay.
Because your estate involves 2 different periods of time. It involves a period of time after you die, but also while you're alive. So you are far more likely to become seriously ill and need assistance than you are to die just in one moment. 95% of people plus are incapacitated for at least 6 to 9 months before they die. So who is going to pay your mortgage? Who's going to talk to the doctors? Who is going to help make medical decisions? Who's going to decide to pull the plug? Do you have any guidance on that? If you don't, then you should have a healthcare power of attorney. So there's two time frames that we have to be worried about: while you're alive and while you're deceased. If you own a business like you do, you have several different intellectual property lines and you have several different businesses, then you have to have a second set of issues. You need to be concerned with who's going to control your businesses during your lifetime, who's going to wind them down, who's going to operate them, who's going to sell them, if possible. Do you have a succession plan? And then probably more importantly, who's going to make sure that you're protected? And who's going to, if you have children, who's going to protect your children? If you have family members that you want to benefit, who's going to protect them? So we have to think about you during your lifetime and you after you pass away. So you're right. You're right in the decisions that you want to protect things and you want to prevent things from going to probate. But at the same time, you need to make sure that the person is protected because you are far more important than just your stuff.
Wow, this is phenomenal. So I didn't realize that the estate planning covers you while you live as well. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that piece of information because it's huge. We did dive into a little bit about size of assets, but just for kind of clarity's sake, how much in assets should someone have before they consider estate planning? You know what I mean?
That's a good question. It's going to be very state specific, and so I don't know the rule for Michigan.
Okay.
But I can tell you that there's two categories of plans. Okay. Why don't we call them three? Three categories of plans. The first category of plan is where someone doesn't have enough to cause a probate issue. In California, that's $185,000 of cash for investments or any type of real estate. And so in California, if someone has $190,000 of cash, they probably can't use a more simple plan. They might need a more complicated plan. So a simple plan would be a will, like a last will and testament. It's a letter to a judge. But if you don't have to go in front of a judge, there's no worry because you won't have a probate. So if someone has $100,000 of assets, they can have a will. In addition to the will, with the simple plan, they're going to need power of attorney for finances. In that document, you name someone to manage your finances if you are alive, but mentally incapable. And you need a power of attorney for healthcare, a document to allow someone else to manage your healthcare decisions if you are incapable, but still living. Okay, so that's plan number one. Plan number two is more complicated, where somebody has sufficient assets. In California, it's more than $190,000 plus, or any real estate. Michigan, it might be a different number. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But the more complicated plan is probably going to involve a document to avoid probate, sometimes called a living trust or a revocable trust. Trust is just a contract. It's an agreement to hold stuff and to pass it to other people so that you don't have to go in front of a judge. It's really what it's for.
Mm-hmm. See, now I have a lot of questions about that trust thing, but I have one more question regarding the asset question, because I think it's something really powerful for folks, including myself, to know. So, like a home, many people are making payments on their home. And if you're still making payments on your things, can you still have an estate plan for that? Or do you have to own everything outright first?
It's a good question. You do not have to own everything outright. There were some laws that were passed in the 90s and 2000s that allowed a property to be put into a trust. It's very rare for banks to allow you to borrow money on a house in a trust. So it's more common that you will have to withdraw the home from the trust, borrow on the home, and then put it back in if you want to refinance, for example. But you can certainly put a house with a mortgage into a trust. There's no problems with that. There's an additional question. Did you ask a different question? Did I miss a second one? Or was
No. So the second question that I have regarding a trust. So this is separate. Well, we've passed through the assets, kind of understanding how much, and I know, and you've made it very clear. And so folks, listeners, watchers, again, he's giving us great advice, but state specific. So there are slight changes wherever we live. With that said, when it comes to a trust, so this is something that I have personally been trying to crack the code on, and I've just been so confused about, because I have that basic understanding that you can put your assets in a trust. And from my understanding, when you do that, there's a couple of things that happen with the transfer of those properties. Let's say when you pass away, or whenever you decide to transfer the property. And I understand that there are maybe some protections as well for those assets. Let's say if there were some kind of lawsuit or something like that. Is that true? And if so, what does that mean for your ownership stake? That's where it gets a little confusing for me.
So define the lawsuit, because with the law, we work in very small pieces. Mm-hmm. We don't make big, broad generalizations, because oftentimes generalizations mean that there's something wrong. And so define what's the lawsuit about and who's being sued.
Well, so I've heard two theories around the trust and kind of protecting assets in a trust. Okay. One of the things that I have heard is that you want to do this when you are starting to gain assets and you want to either transfer it for family or leave it to your spouse, and you want it to not be charged extra money to do so, like when that transfer takes place.
Okay.
The second thing I've heard is that it's also a way where that now that's contractually kind of almost separated. So then if something should happen in some kind of lawsuit, and again, it's general because even my understanding is general, but that now that trust has that protected. It's like separate from you. Kind of like, you know how in business, folks will have their corporation and it's separate from them personally. Is that true? Or is that just, stuff I'm hearing around the way through folks sharing their limited, knowledge on this?
So it's very good questions. So with the first question, when you put the money into the trust, is it separated from you? It is held under a contract, but it's still considered yours. So it's not separated from you in the fact that if it's a revocable living trust, meaning that you've put the money in and you want to be able to control it and take the money out whenever you want, then there is no practical difference between you owning the money or having the money in a trust. There's no difference in that situation. Okay, so to answer question number one, it's not separated from you. It's actually given into a specific holding mechanism that's considered yours for all intents and purposes. Insurance purposes, oftentimes, tax purposes, income purposes, it is for all those purposes, it's you. Okay?
Perfect.
Then we have a different situation. And the different situation is something that you might be looking to prevent someone from suing you. That's called asset protection. Mm-hmm. It is very state specific. There are several states that allow you to create a trust that will prevent people from taking from it if you owe them money. So someone sues me, and can they take money from my trust? And that can never be done with a revocable living trust. Revocable means I can take the money back whenever I want. And if I owe someone money, they can force me to take the stuff back. It's called a collection. Right? Mm-hmm, so if you owe money to a credit card, they can send you to collections. They're trying to take what you have. So if you have a revocable living trust, it doesn't work. There's a second category of trust, and I don't want to say second type because my firm does 21 different types of trusts.
Wow.
About 10 of them are irrevocable, meaning that they cannot be taken back easily. 11 of them are revocable in nature. And so that might be surprising to you, saying, whoa, there's all these different types of trust. A trust is a tool to hold and transfer assets. And in between the hold and the transfer, there are different circumstances that you want to qualify for. Not all trusts are the same. Not all trusts are one size fit all. If somebody says that to you, they're trying to sell you something that isn't real. Okay? And so the best attorneys are going to ask you a lot of questions. Why do you want to do this? Where are the assets located? What type of things are you holding? Does someone owe you money now? Do you owe someone money now? Is there a lawsuit pending? Is there a collection? Is this a concern? Do you know that this is going to happen? All of these questions relate to whether this is possible. But in several states, it is possible to create a very specific, special type of trust, put non-real estate assets into that trust, and have the money protected so that someone cannot easily take it from you. Those states are Alaska, Nevada, South Dakota, Delaware, there's Wyoming, there's several others. Oh. But it's a very fact-specific situation. And I get calls about this all the time. Mm-hmm. In California, this is not possible. And so I got a call last week from someone who said, hey, I'm concerned about lawsuits. I think that someone might be trying to take my stuff. And I told him, well, it's not possible in California. I do work with some firms in Nevada where we can partner on this. You can create one in Nevada, but and I asked him about his assets, and it wasn't worth the time and effort given the nature of the expenses that he would incur, that he would have to pay in creating the trust, because asset protection is not cheap. It's not cheap, and the reason why it's not cheap is because it's not easy. You're basically trying to stop someone else from taking something who owes money to you. Have you ever heard of it being cheap and easy to stop a collection agent from coming after you? No. No. They are highly motivated. Yes. They're supercharged to come and take your stuff. And so it has to be really strong. So when people say asset protection, put a trust, that's easy. And the answer is the trust is just a thing. It's just a document. How you use it is the most important thing, right? If you put a very famous race car driver in a Toyota Corolla, they're going to beat anybody in a Ferrari on a racetrack because they know how to drive it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's so true. I love how you've already clarified so many things. And I think it's important because, as you know, I'm sure you know, there's so much information that swirls around us. So many folks, on YouTube, on social, sharing these quick bits. And there is often so much more to that, even on the basic level. So even what you're sharing now about the different types of trusts, state specific, why it costs, why you may or may not be able to pursue that option, what to avoid when someone that may be highly motivated to get you to work with them on a trust and they may say certain things that actually aren't something we want to listen to. It's been so wonderful. And I appreciate that because this is very valuable information for folks that are wanting to, engage in activities that allow them to maybe be more responsible with their money, better stewards of their money, and so forth. Speaking of which, how would you say estate planning helps in terms of retaining and both maybe building wealth? Because that's another thing I've heard about this type of a strategy is that oftentimes that's how wealth is kind of built and maintained over generations. Is that true? And does this help to retain or build wealth, this type of action here?
It's a tool, but it's part of the overall plan. So every person who's very wealthy, every family that's wealthy and that keeps their wealth has 5 different individuals who help them with financial affairs. Okay. They have an estate attorney like me. They have a financial advisor, oftentimes one who's certified for them. They have an insurance agent, probably a certified agent called a certified chartered insurance professional. They have a realtor who's probably good about buying and selling property. And they have a CPA. And you'll notice that each one of those 5 people deals with one thing in common, and that is they deal with transitions. People are good at managing their money. People generally are good at it unless they're really, really challenged. They can generally put money into a bank account, and they can learn how to spend it and how to not overspend. Okay, I heard a quote from a business leader who I went and saw last week, and he said that money loves speed and wealth loves time. And so to become wealthy, it just takes time because you need to get money, which comes fast, but then you need to not spend it, which takes longer. And so one tool is an estate plan, but that's only one because it deals with transitions of control. I only deal with control. I only transfer control and ownership when an event occurs. That's my only job. But there are other people that need to deal with other transitions. Buying and selling real estate is a realtor. Helping to cover cash deficiencies at some event is an insurance agent. You need to make sure that you don't pay the IRS too much. That's a CPA. You also need to make sure that you're not making stupid decisions with your money, which is a financial advisor. Now, financial advisors can't gauge the market. They can't tell you that one stock will perform better than others. But what they can do is they can stop you from making rash decisions. And so each of those people deal with transitions, and that's where people get in trouble. The reason why they get in trouble is because it's just a level of experience. If you are really, really good at something, you were once really bad. No one is ever super good at something automatically. And if they are, I would think, wow, that's really weird. You shouldn't be. First time I put up a YouTube video was horrible. But now we're okay. And we're getting better because we look at what we did, we see the mistakes, and we do something better. The only reason that attorneys like me are better at this than other people is because we've seen thousands of transitions. I've seen thousands of transactions where someone is approaching it for their first time. And if they've never done it before, if they've never seen that type of transaction before, they simply don't know what mistakes they're going to make. And everyone makes the same mistakes the first time. It's just a learning cycle. And so wealthy people understand one really important thing. They understand that the value that someone provides is the ability to fast forward mistakes and learning. Either you can spend the time yourself in which you actually spend your own value learning how not to make mistakes, or you can hire someone else for value to not make the mistakes for you. That's it.
Yes, I love how you put that because another question that I will often ask my guests is, what they feel or have experienced in regards to investing in help, professional help, like coaching, mentorship, what you said, additional learning, assistance with services like yours, attorneys, CPAs. What is the value? Because I think that for many folks who aren't just, like you said, we're all in a learning curve. And depending wherever we're at, some of us may be born kind of more into these types of conversations because maybe our families or people, caregivers or whatever are teaching us that this is of a high value. But most folks maybe don't have that perspective. Most folks maybe have a different perspective. So it can be challenging to kind of change gears and say, I'm used to filing my own taxes. I can do it. And, they can, but what is the value? What is that value? So I love how you put that because it's exactly right, at least in my own experience, when it comes to investing in that help that maybe before was totally off the table. It is exactly that. It is saving me time I will never get back and helping me to really avoid inevitable mistakes when I'm just learning. So
there's two. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but there's so many things that I'd love to say.
So please.
There's two things that I'd like to say. Number one is a psychological principle called the Keebler-Dunning effect. It basically says that when anybody is approaching a new problem, they will not understand the depth of the difficulty of the problem, and so they will think that it's easy. And that's called unearned optimism. You haven't earned the right to understand how to do this well. It's also sometimes people call it the grass is always greener on the other side, right? Because you don't know the problems. Mm-hmm. Another way of saying it is that you don't want somebody else's life because you don't want to walk in their shoes. You don't know what puddles they have to walk through, right? Mm-hmm. Well, then once you see a specific problem, then you can see that the problem that this thing that you want to pursue actually has problems, and you have to learn them. And most people give up when they learn how difficult the problem is, and then they just find a new problem. And if they think that the problem is important enough, then they need help, they need coaching, or they need to figure it out. And what coaching really does, I have 3 different coaches. I have a business coach. Mm-hmm. So an attorney who has helped hundreds of attorneys do better. That was my second coach that I hired. Mm-hmm. First coach that I hired was a mastermind group where I fly across the country to different attorneys' offices, and we meet together. I think there's 13 or 14 of us, and each of them is in the same practice that I am, but all of them have more experience than I have. And so I go to those different offices and I learn from them, and I listen to the problems that they have, and they listen to my problems. I get to present one problem a quarter. Mm-hmm. And I found that that's just not fast enough for me. I want it to be faster than that. Mm-hmm. And so after doing that for 2 years, I hired another coach. And I went to now an enterprise level just because I couldn't find an attorney group that had large enough firms to where I want to go. And so 3 coaches. The reason why I did that is not because I couldn't figure it out, because I totally could. I could totally figure it out. But I'm going to pay for something in 2 ways. Either I'm going to pay for it in time to learn myself, or I'm going to pay someone else to fast forward that time for me to explain to me why it works. And so in the evenings when I go home, I listen to podcasts and I read books, and I have a whole bunch up here. One of the best ones that I ever read was this book here, which is called The Goal. Uh-huh. It's about how to take a manufacturing facility and make it faster. And so it has nothing to do with law, except it has everything to do with law, because my goal is to make my productivity faster, right?
Yes.
In operations. And so there's another principle that you can think about your employees. And I tried very hard to hire employees who were cheap and didn't know what they were doing. And I found that when I did that, that they were uncommitted and frustrated, because I could teach them what I knew, that I need them to be better than me at the things that they do, because if they're better than me, then they can add something to the business that I cannot. Mm-hmm. And so my first full-time assistant, I looked at 150 resumes. I interviewed 6 people. I chose one, and my current assistant and my wife both said, no, don't hire that person. You should hire this other one who didn't have a degree and had experience not in my area, but in a different area, but she had the right attitude. And I wanted the experience. I wanted the pedigree. And they said, no, this person has the right. She's still with me. And she's fantastic. She's my right hand. I bounce everything off of her. She is phenomenal. When she came into my business, my income, my revenue went up by 40%.
Wow.
Because I was doing everything myself. My second hire was a full-time paralegal who was a former paralegal. Revenue went up another 40%. And then we hired an intake specialist. Revenue went up again because I hire people to do things that I can't. And so I look for people. So I've now hired a social media manager who's in El Salvador. It doesn't matter to me where she is. And she set up an entire internet system and social media system that basically took her 4 months to build, but it would have taken me years.
Yes.
And so by paying someone else, I fast forwarded myself. So the question is, do you want to pay to train someone to be better and pay with time, your time, to learn to be better? Or do you want to pay someone else who already knows how to be better and they can simply fast forward the process for you? And my choice is I understood after starting my own business and learning that I keep all the profit, I want to be faster.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for really explaining that, because I think a lot of times, it's first of all, there are transitions. There's the transition into how do I justify or how do I even wrap my head around what this value may be? Especially if it's new to you, it's hard to justify that because it's somewhat of an intangible. Then we move into the fear that most people face of like, it's tangible money going towards this seemingly intangible thing. And can I, will I, what if it, and then thirdly, sometimes I think, especially because as a life coach, it's kind of like if your mom or dad and you're telling your children, you are awesome and amazing. It's like, yeah, mom, dad, like, it's you, you're going to tell me that I'm awesome and amazing. So I think that sometimes hearing from a coach, the power of coaching, it's like, yeah, but you have a vested interest to tell me that. So I just love how you are explaining the importance, the power, the speed, the value of what it takes, when you make those investments, when you make those leaps. It's huge.
So let me explain to you a story that I heard about the Sky bicycle team. Sky bicycle team is the British national team. They were dead last in the Tour de France for years in a row. And I hired a new coach, and the old coaches were trying to find the one thing that would break everything out, the one thing that's going to make everything better. And the new coach that they hired, the head coach said, we're not going to look at one thing. We're going to look at everything. We're going to revamp all of your systems, and our goal is only with every change that we do, we want to be 1% better. So they looked at their nutrition. They looked at their sleep cycle. They even got new pillows. They got they tested everyone for sleep apnea. They looked at everyone's recovery cycle. They looked at their VO2 max. They even looked at their bicycles and they redid all the frames. They redid the spokes on the wheels. Sky, after 4 years of that effort, won the Tour de France.
Oh.
7 years in a row.
Oh my gosh.
Why?
Yes.
Why? Because if you can imagine, growth and improvements are compounding. And there is no golden bullet in life. There is no golden bullet in business. There's no golden bullet in anything. In marriage, there's no golden bullet. There's no silver bullet, but there are 1,000 golden bullets. Mm-hmm. There are 1,000 things that you can do to be just a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And you'll notice there's this pattern that happens at huge companies. If you look at Coca-Cola's stock value or income value, you see that it starts at the bottom left and it goes up and then slightly down and then up and then slightly down and up and slightly down and up and slightly down. Why doesn't it just go up all the time? That doesn't make sense. It actually does. It makes perfect sense. What happens is that they're fixing problems. They fix problems, they find the most that they can get out of this one avenue. And then they say, we think there's another thing that we can add to this. Let's go ahead and fix that problem. And then they have to put all of their effort in, and they're not putting all their effort into making money over here because they already know how to do it. Now they put their effort into a new problem that they think can bring us higher, and we're going to invest. We're investing our time and energy into this problem. And once we fix it, then our income goes higher. So it goes up, slightly down, up, slightly down. That's how I want to live my entire life.
Yes.
My entire life, I want to be better every single day.
Yes.
Because I think that's my purpose. In 150 years, you're going to be dead. I'm going to be dead. Everybody who listens to this podcast will be dead. Nobody will remember our names. But I feel that it's important for me to try to leave the world a better place and to try to be a better person in between, because it really shouldn't be about me. It should be about all the effects that I can make.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. There are so many things, but I definitely want to touch a little bit about the compassion. Okay, because you mentioned compassion specifically. And if I may be fair, it's very rare that you would say compassion and law put together, right? Please, please, please talk to me about your focus on compassion, what it means to you, and how, what does that mean specifically, these relationships you're building, and how does that translate? Please shed some light on that.
So there's two general types of attorneys. There's a lot of types, but there's two general varieties. Ones that argue in court and ones that don't. Okay. If you have a personal injury and you're severely injured and there was a big trucking company that hurt you, you need to go to someone who's a boxer or a fighter. And that person doesn't really have a whole lot of compassion for the situation they're going to try to take from others. And that's okay. That's not me. I am the guy who actually tries to solve people's problems, but they're very personal in nature. Imagine that you went and you sat down with someone and you told them your deepest, darkest fears, and before you even got there, you had to share all of your bank account information, all of your property information, and all of your financial history. I asked for 2 years of tax returns. People share their tax returns with me before they even see me. Well, that requires a lot of trust. It also requires that I help them. So in all of my messaging to my potential clients and my colleagues and even my staff, the goal is always to focus on the person. The money is just a thing. The income is just a thing. The fee is just a thing. Our relationship is most important because it's really about you. It should be about you. And it should be about the people who need to be protected. Today, I had a meeting with a client who's in his 90s, and he cannot go to the bank or operate his own accounts by himself. And I could certainly have said, I'm sorry, you can't do this by yourself anymore. Your sons have to take over and you can no longer be involved, and shut the door. Done. But that's not the best thing for him. The best thing for him is to have his children be partners with him. Allow him to continue to be involved, because it's going to help him long term to feel important, to feel connected, to feel a part of it. And that helps his heart. It helps his mind. It helps his spirit. It helps him as a whole person. So we prepare a plan, which is more difficult for the kids. It is more difficult for the family, that they know it's better for him. And so really what it's about is it's always about the person. Now, there are other attorneys who don't focus on that, and that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Each person brings their own value into the marketplace. It just so happens that a lot of people that come to us are bringing elderly or challenged family members, and we're going to help them all.
I love this so much. I love this so, so much. It has been such a joy to speak with you, to have you on. Thank you so much. This podcast is so rich with so many wonderful things, and I just am so grateful to you. Please, 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 tell our listeners once more where they can find you. And I do understand you can only help people in California, but hey, we can follow you on social, and we can, so please share your information for everyone.
So I'm assuming that our social media will be in the show notes, and so they can see that. But our website is keyslawgroup.com, KEYESLAWGROUP.com. We also have a YouTube channel and podcasts, and those can be found to Keys to Your Legacy, KEYSTOYOURLEGACY, Legacy. Most important thing for us when we're putting information out to the public is to try to be honest and try to be credible. I have to give one caveat here, one disclaimer to say that when people listen to this show, it doesn't create an attorney-client relationship, and they can't rely upon me without ever hearing what they said to rely upon it to make sure that they make personal decisions on that. They shouldn't rely on this. They should actually go see an attorney. They should go see someone who has skill. If they want to do things online, meaning like an online service, like a company, they totally can. But just know that they get what they pay for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listeners, friends, watchers, I could say the same thing as your best life coach. This podcast is here to, help you find that support and motivation and encouragement and access to people that can help you to achieve your best. With that said, this is in no way a coaching client relationship. It's no way a lawyer client relationship. If you want that, you got to actually connect with us personally, and then we walk that road together. All right. Thank you so much, Elijah. You are phenomenal, and I certainly will be following you. And thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation. You're fantastic.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe and visit teemaree.com/free for more goodness.